In this lecture, we're going to go ahead and take all the information that we've learned thus far, and we're going to apply it to create the first drawing of a simple asset. Now, this is not going to be a final product asset. I just want to get you to start building instincts for drawing and creating value and contrast. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a new layer. Then we're going to go ahead and create a horizon line. And then we're going to go ahead and create our 1 point. Next, let's go ahead and create a surface coming out like so. So we'll draw one line there and one line there. And then from here to there, I'm going to go ahead and draw a straight line, and same with back here. So maybe about there. Perfect. Next, what we want to do is we're going to create a circle in here, but rather than drawing it in by hand, what we're going to do is we're going to grab our shape tool, which is this one right here. And if you're not on a circular shape tool, you can go ahead and hold down on this, and you'll see you get all these different shapes that you can choose from. Make sure that you have the ellipse tool selected, and then let's go ahead and draw out our circle. Hold down Shift to make a perfect circle, and we want it to be about the size of the square we just created. Next, let's come over to our properties panel that should pop up, and let's go ahead and change the color to our dark blue color that we're working with. And then we're going to change right here where it says 15 pixels. We're going to change that to 4 pixels. Go ahead and hit enter. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and click out of that panel. Then using the transform tool, which is going to be Control T on your keyboard, or if you're on a Mac, it's going to be Command T. Now what this allows us to do is it allows us to scale and reshape our shape. So if I go grab that corner like so, you see I can resize it. I'm going to undo that move. What we want to do is we want to right click on our shape and then come down to distort. And now what we can do is we can grab each corner and drag it to wherever we like. So I'm going to drag it so that it lines up with each one of these corners. And what this is going to do is it's going to make this circle in our perspective once we line it up with that surface like so. So now we can go ahead and hit enter. Yes. And now you can see that our circle has been recreated in that perspective. So let's go ahead and erase away our horizon line and our perspective lines. In fact, we can go ahead and delete that whole layer. You just delete a layer by clicking the layer and hitting delete. Next, let's go ahead and grab this ellipse and let's bring it up like so to about the center. Now let's just go ahead and freehand the rest of our asset. So this asset is going to be a platform surface that our character can jump up onto. Now first what I want to do is I want to try erasing my circle. So I'll switch over to my erase tool and I'll try to erase that. And you'll see that it says I can't erase this. If I go ahead and hit OK, what this is going to do is it's going to flatten my shape. So right now you can see with this little icon on my thumbnail for my layer, that means that it's a vectorized shape and it can't be erased. If I go ahead and hit OK, you'll see that disappears. And now it's just a flattened image. So I can go ahead and erase that now. Next, what I want to do is I want to switch over to my brush tool and I'm going to go ahead and start drawing this in. So the first thing I'm going to draw is I'm going to draw the edge of my grass. The top of our surface is going to have grass grown on it. So I'm going to go ahead and just sketch that in like so. And you can even add grass to the top. Then I'm going to go ahead and erase away some of this line right here so it's not such a hard line. And we can even add some grass lines to that. Perfect. Next, let's go ahead and add the bottom of our platform. So I'm just going to draw it in and eyeball it. So it's going to be sort of a rock texture. So something like so, and then we might have more lines in there, like so. And then we might add in a few little pebbles and rocks in there, just to make it look more interesting. Great. So now we have our drawing. Next, what we want to do is we want to add some value to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new layer beneath this. And then I can go ahead and grab a mid-gray and fill that in. So I'll grab that mid-gray, and using my brush tool and bringing the brush size up, I can just go ahead and quickly fill in that entire shape. Now this doesn't have to be perfect. When we're creating our final assets, we can take more time to make sure everything looks perfect, but for this, let's just go ahead and practice drawing and creating values. Great. Next, what we want to do is we want to break this up into two different values. So we're going to leave this grass, this mid value, and then we want to change this bottom part into a darker value. So we're going to grab a value that's about in the middle, and then we're going to go ahead and fill in this whole area. Now if you go over onto your grass, that's okay. We can go ahead and refill that in once we're done. So I'll just go ahead and select my mid-gray, and now we can just go ahead and fill in those spaces that got covered by our darker gray. Perfect. Next, what we want to do is we want to find a highlight color for this gray for the top surface of our platform. So let's come into our color picker, and we're going to come to about there. You can see the difference between the two values right here. Hit OK, and then let's go ahead and fill in this top surface. So once I get these two corners where it's pretty small, I can go ahead and enlarge my brush and fill in that whole area like so. Next, let's go ahead and add in some darker drop shadows. So I'm going to select my dark shadow color, then I'm going to grab an even darker version of that, and then looking at my new and current color just to compare them, we'll go ahead and hit OK. And using my brush tool, I'll go ahead and start with the drop shadow that'll be cast from my grass. So it's just going to go right underneath the edge of this grass, like so. Then there might be a little bit of shadow on these edges right here, because that's some form. And then there's probably going to be some shadow on this bottom, like so, since no light is going to be hitting it. Perfect. In our next lecture, we're going to learn about color theory and how to choose your colors. Then we're going to go ahead and take this and add some color to it. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture. In this lecture, we're going to be going over color theory and how to choose your colors for your game assets. So the first thing we want to go over with color theory is the color wheel. So we have the color wheel right here. And what a color wheel is it just shows the transition between colors. It also shows what the opposite color of a color is. So for example, the opposite of blue is orange. And you can tell that because it's right across from the other. So if we have a look at the purple, the opposite of purple is yellow. Now these are also called complementary colors. The reason why they're called complementary colors is because they look really good together. So for example, if we go ahead and use our color picker to select this yellow, then using our brush, we can go ahead and paint a little splotch of that color. And we can select our purple and paint next to that. So those two colors look really good together. Same with orange and blue. Let's try those. Now you might be noticing that even though these look good together, they can look kind of funny. So this blue and this orange together look funny. It's almost creating a weird dark edge on the edge of the blue. The reason for this is because they're both completely saturated. So when you have two complementary colors, you want to choose one to be your dominant color. So let's say we choose orange as our dominant color. Let's go ahead and select that again. We'll paint a new splotch down here. Next, let's go ahead and select our blue color. Now, the further away you get from this orange on the color wheel, the less saturation you want to have in it. So by the time you get all the way over to this blue, you almost want it to be a bluish gray. This purple will be a little bit less desaturated, but still have some desaturation. And this orange right next to it can be almost the exact same. So let me show you what I mean. So now that we have our blue selected, let's come into our color picker. And now we can take the color saturation down by dragging our color over to the left of our color picker. And as you see, it gets more towards the gray side of things. So we want to drag that to about there. Go ahead and hit OK. Now let's go ahead and brush that in. Now that looks a lot more easy on the eyes. Now this doesn't mean that you can't ever use a really bright blue with a bright orange. It's just a general rule of thumb that the more opposite colors are on the color wheel, the less saturation you want to have in one of those colors. So let's go ahead and add a purple into these two colors and see how that looks with them. So if I select this purple right here, then I'm going to come into my color picker, and since it's about in the middle, we want to desaturate that to about there. Hit OK. And then we can go ahead and paint that with those two also. And so now you can see these three colors go really well together. Let's try the same thing with orange and green. So I'm going to select this green, and I'm going to make the green my dominant color. Then I'm going to select this orange sort of red color down here, and I'm going to desaturate that. So I'm going to bring it all the way over to somewhere in there. So it's almost a pink, but it's also very desaturated. Then let's add a third color in there. So I'm going to grab this purplish blue right here, and then I'm going to desaturate that to about there. Hit OK. Now I can paint that in. So now you can see these three colors also go really well together. Next, let's go over monochromatic color schemes. So this is a complementary color scheme, but now we're going to go over monochromatic. Monochromatic means that it's the same color. So for example, let's say that we were painting a painting and we only wanted to use purples and violets. This would be considered a monochromatic painting. So let's try creating some monochromatic color schemes. So let's select our purple color, and let's go ahead and paint a splotch. Next, you want to find a highlight and a shadow color. So we're going to come over to our color picker, and we're going to lighten this color. About there should be good. Hit OK. And we can go ahead and have that as our highlight color. Then let's go ahead and reselect this darker purple, and we're going to bring that down towards the darker side. And we can go ahead and paint that in. So that would be considered a monochromatic color scheme. We can also select the colors that are right next to it and add those. So if I select this color right here, I can go ahead and add that into my color scheme. Same with this one right here. I might even darken this one. But this is considered a monochromatic color scheme. Next, let's go over warm and cool colors. So what are warm and cool colors? Well, warm colors are any colors that are on this side of the spectrum. So from this orange to this lime green, everything in between is a warm color. Cool colors are anything from this violet to this green, and anything in between. Those are all considered cool colors. Now, what do you use warm and cool colors for? Well, you use them for highlights and shadows. So generally, a shadow is going to be created with cool lights, because light from the sun, for example, is very warm, and so it creates warm colors. When an object isn't being hit by light, it's generally going to go with a cool color. So an example of this is if you've ever seen snow, you notice that the shadow of the snow is sort of a blue color rather than just a black or a gray. That's because it's a cool color. So how do you pick warm and cool colors? Well, let's say we have a sphere, and our color for the sphere is going to be, let's say, sort of a green color like so. We'll hit OK. Let's go ahead and paint in that circle for our sphere. Next, we want to find a highlight color. Now, since it's going to be a highlight color, we want it to be more towards the warm side of things. So the way we can find our highlight color is by coming into our color picker. First off, because it's a highlight, we want to draw it more towards the white side of our spectrum. So we have a lighter version of that. Next, we want to grab this bar right here, and we want to drag this down more towards the yellow side. Now, you don't have to drag it all the way into the yellows, but you want to keep it more towards the yellow side than your original green. And that's going to create that warm highlight. So let's go ahead and hit OK. Then using my brush tool, I can go ahead and paint in that highlight like so. And if we wanted to, we could do an even brighter highlight to add a gloss to that. So we'll drag this down more towards the yellow, and then we can drag this up more towards the white. And we can add another highlight there. Now let's go ahead and add our shadow. So coming back to my original green color, with the shadow, we want to move this more towards the cool side. So with this green, the cool side is going to be more towards the blues. So even though green is already a cool color, you can still always find a cooler color for the color that you're working with. And vice versa. You can always find a warm color even if you're already working with a warm color. So let's go ahead and drag this more towards the blues. So you can see up here that our color kind of becomes more of an aqua color. Let's go ahead and drag the darkness down to about there. And using my brush tool, I can go ahead and paint in my shadow. Now this isn't going to be perfect. This is just for demonstration purposes to show you how warm and cool colors work. Now you can see that looks a lot more interesting than if I were to just take this green and then use a light version of it and a dark version of it. Your game assets will look much more interesting if you use warm and cool shadows. Real quick, I want to redo this example, but with a warm color. That way you can see that even if you're working with a warm color, you can still find a warm highlight for it. Just like you could find a cool shadow for this green, even though green is already a cool color. So let's go ahead and select this orange right here. So let's go ahead and select this red color right here. We'll go ahead and brush in that shape. Next, we're going to go ahead and find a highlight color for that. So I'm going to grab my bar and I'm going to drag it towards the yellow side of things. Like so. So we get sort of that orange color. Then we're going to drag this over more towards the light side. Hit OK. Then let's go ahead and brush in that highlight. Then we can go ahead and grab an even lighter version and bring it more towards the yellow side of things so it becomes warmer. We can go ahead and add in that glossy highlight. And now let's find a cool shadow for this red. So you can see here, I can't really pull it down anymore, but the red starts all the way over on this side and continues into the purple. So what I'll do is I'll drag this all the way up to the top, and then I can drag it down to about there. So we get sort of that pinkish purplish color. Then I'm going to bring down the darkness on that, like so, hit OK. And using my brush, I'm going to go ahead and paint in that shadow. Now that's not looking dark enough for me, so I'm going to go ahead and darken that even more. Perfect. But you can see how much more interesting these spheres look when you use warm highlights and cool shadows. Now let's go ahead and look at some examples. So the first example we're going to look at is an example of complementary colors. So when you look at this drawing, the first thing that stands out is the blue hair and the orange dress. Now if you can remember on our color wheel, those are complementary colors. So let's come back and look at that. So you can see here, this blue and this orange and that blue and this orange are complementary to each other. So we followed that rule here. Now let's go ahead and have a look at another example. So here's another example of complementary colors. This was a costume piece that I designed for a live theater production. And the two colors that stand out to you immediately is the yellow gold and the blue aqua. So let's go ahead and come back into our color wheel. And you'll see here that even though blue and yellow and orange are not necessarily complementary colors, they still really work well together because they're almost opposite of each other. Let's have a look at another example. So this next example is an example of a monochromatic painting. So this is a digital painting that I did of a girl. And if we go ahead and use our eyedropper tool and you watch over here in the color picker box, you'll see that each color stays within the purple range. There aren't really any other colors except for purples, reds, and violets. So even this color down here that appears to be a gray is still more of a purple color. So now that we have an idea of how color theory works and how to choose our colors, let's go ahead and come into our document where we've created our platform. And what we're going to do is we're going to add some color to this. Now the way we're going to add color to this is by adding a new layer above all of our layers. And then we're going to change our blend mode from normal to color. And what this is going to do is whatever we paint on this layer, it's only going to take that color and the saturation of that color and then apply it to our value. You'll see here in a second. So first, let's decide what colors we want. So for grass, it's obviously going to be green. Next, we need to find a complementary color for that. So what's the complementary color of green? It's orange. So if we come back into our document, we now know that we want green and orange together. Now, if this dirt was orange and the grass was green and both were completely saturated, we already know from experience that those would not look very good together. So let's go ahead and select our green, and we're going to make green our dominant color. So we're going to bring it to somewhere up here. I don't want to bring it all the way up to the corner because completely saturated colors don't always look very good. Let's go ahead and hit OK. Then using my brush tool, I'm going to go ahead and paint in this grass area like so. And you can see here how the layer is utilizing the color that I've selected, but it's also letting me see the value through the color. So we still get that shadow on this edge of the grass. Next, let's go ahead and select an orange color. And because green is our dominant color, we want our complementary color to be very desaturated. So we'll come way over like so. And we might even darken it a little bit. So somewhere in there. Then we can go ahead and brush in this bottom area. Great. Next, what we want to do is we want to find our shadow colors. So if you remember, we want our shadows to be cool colors. So right now we have this sort of very desaturated orange color. What we want to do is we want to grab a darker version of that, because this is going to be the drop shadow underneath the grass. And then we also want to grab a cooler version of that. So if we moved up towards the yellow, that would become a warm color. So we want to move away from that. So we're going to come down into the reds, hit OK. And now we can go ahead and paint in that drop shadow. And it kind of creates this nice purple color. Purples are very nice drop shadow colors, and they'll make your images look a lot better. Perfect. Next, let's find a shadow color for this grass. So if we select this green again, and it's not going to select the exact color because we have our values applied to it. So I'm going to drag this back to where we were before, so about there. And then what I want to do is I want to grab more of a blue-green. So I'm going to come up to about there. So you can see here we get more of an aqua green. That's going to be the cooler color. And using my brush, I'll go ahead and paint that in. Now, that's a little bit too aqua, so I'm going to bring that down just a little bit to about there. And then I can go ahead and repaint that in. Next, I want to add a highlight to my grass. So I'm going to come back into my color picker, and I'm going to bring this back down to the greens. And then I want to lighten my color just a little bit and come more down towards the yellows. So now I have my highlight color. And because the value is already being applied to this, it's not showing up as very light. So what I can do is I can add a new layer above this and then paint on top like so, and now that lighter value is going to come through my color. Great. So now we've finished our asset. Now obviously this is not by any means perfect, but the purpose of this exercise was to demonstrate how to draw your assets, how to add value to them, and how to add color to them. That brings us to the end of this lecture. So in this lecture, you learned about color theory and how to choose your colors. So just remember, when you're choosing colors, you either want them to be complementary, so straight across from each other on the color wheel, or you want it to be monochromatic, which is choosing one color to create the whole painting or image with. And lastly, you learned about warm and cool highlights and shadows. So remember that you want your highlights to be warm, which are the oranges, yellows, and reds, and you want your shadows to be cools, which are greens, purples, and blues. In the next lecture, we're going to actually jump in and start building your first game asset. I'm super excited. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture.